All right. Welcome back to Peak Human. I'm Brian Sanders. I just finished recording with my pal Ben Azadi. Super fun episode. What a great guy. Really informative. Oh man, I loved it. Talked about all my favorite topics, metabolic flexibility, real food. We worked in some Africa stuff, mindset stuff, really great stuff on how to actually enact this new plan, change your identity, be healthy. His book, Metabolic Freedom, is great. Came out recently. Go back, listen to the old episodes. So many good episodes in Peak Human. They still apply. Work your way backwards. Start from the beginning, whatever you want to do. Support Nose to Tail, nosetatail.org. We got the oyster pills, the number one thing that I think will actually change your health, that you can actually feel all those missing nutrients in your diet. We got the body care, beef tallow body care. Don't put toxins on your skin. And yeah, Food Lies. We're well on our way with the new production company. It's coming out. It's going to be great. We're making it happen. Enjoy this one with Ben Azadi. All right, we got Ben Azadi in the house. What's going on, man?
Brian, it's an honor to be on your show. Love the work you're doing. We're going to have some fun today, man.
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming. We've been doing some health stuff for many years, and I love what you're doing. You're over in Florida, and
Yes.
I always see you when you come to Austin, so that's fun.
Yeah, love your Sapien Center. Beautiful facility. Love Austin in general. I mean, it has the most restaurants that are truly seed oil free than any other city I've been to. So I'm a big fan of Austin for that reason.
It is good. Yeah, I don't even go out to eat very much. Even though we have these great restaurants, I'm kind of set in my ways where I just make my own meals and it's great. But yeah, we have good dinners at, say, the Well or some other places
Yeah,
around town.
exactly.
Do you have a seed oil card? I feel like you
I
had a
do.
little card.
Yeah. So I have this handy dandy seed oil allergy card that I've been using for like 6 years now. And I take it to all the restaurants and I show it to the server and I say, look, I'm allergic to seed oils. Here's a list of the ones I'm allergic to. Here are the safer options. And they usually take it to the chef. And then they come back with the menu and they show me all the options that are safe and they accommodate. So yeah, I use this card. You could also just say you're
Mm,
allergic. That's another option as well.
that's so cool. Oh man, that's next level. See, my strategy is just don't go to the restaurants. But no, I get it. You have to go to restaurants sometimes, right? You're traveling, going on a
Yeah.
date. There's different reasons, but
Yeah.
there's also just what you can order, right? It's like get a steak, try to be like, hey, let's cook this thing in butter. Come on.
Exactly. But it's really deceptive because you might think you're going to a steakhouse and you're safe from seed oils. But if you don't bring up the conversation about you being allergic, you might be taking the hit because they'll marinate the steak in a seed oil, a soybean or canola.
Mm.
And you don't know unless you actually tell them you're allergic or have a seed oil card, an allergy card, then they'll find out. And I've been to numerous restaurants where I thought I was safe having their steak because why would there be seed oil if it's just grilled? And
Mhm.
then it turns out they've marinated
Mm.
in soybean. So that's important to find that out.
Good tip. Good tip. All right. Today, one thing we're gonna talk about is your book. I got the galley copy. You sent this to me a while ago, Metabolic Freedom. Thanks
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been reading it. Great stuff. All about it. I feel like we're very aligned in so many things. Did you have like Mark Sisson as a early kind of hero or influence?
Yes, I did. Yeah. Probably 2015, Mark Sisson, Dr. Daniel Pompa, Dave Asprey, Dr. McCullough. Those were some of the influences in my life back then. But Mark Sisson was definitely a prominent influence with this Mark's Daily Apple and his information with Primal Kitchen and his Primal Health Coaching. And he lives really close to me here in Miami. He's a super cool dude. He came to the book launch party as well. So it's cool to now call him a friend and an acquaintance.
Absolutely. I love Mark. Yeah, that was kind of my dream. It's like now he is sort of a friend that I can text or, call. We've
Super
had some
cool.
calls and just helping. Yeah, over the years, it's been so great. Really look up to him. He's 71. He looks amazing.
He
He's
does.
doing it. I like his just whole approach, and he's kind of changing his ideas. I remember actually 5 years ago, we had a little session with Sean Baker and Paul Saladino and Mark and I. Maybe it was 4 years ago. The whole thing with COVID, I never know the years anymore. It was one of those years. It was
Blur.
after Paleo FX where we all got together, all four of us, which is just a beauty of going to these conferences where you could just talk with that group and just And we thought we could do a panel discussion type of debate type of thing. And back then he was like, "Hey, I'm reconsidering my big ass salads." This his whole thing was these giant salads, and so he stopped doing that for years, and I don't know if he's back on a bit. But the idea of change being open to change your opinion, and also just his ideas are kind of evergreen, like, if you have broader opinions, then you don't have to always be changing them when the tide changes. So, like, metabolic flexibility is example of that Mark, I think, popularized,
Yeah.
and you have been talking about too, and I noticed a theme in the book. It's like, most people aren't metabolically flexible. They're just sugar burners. So, yeah, let's go into that. Tell me more.
Yeah, no, exactly. That is the goal, metabolic flexibility, and for sure, Mark Sisson is the pioneer, the father of metabolic flexibility, if you will. That's the ultimate goal. That's what metabolic freedom is. It's a spin off of that. In the U.S., I mean, you know these stats. The amount of money we spend on healthcare every year is crazy. $4.6 trillion every year we spend on healthcare, which would be the fourth largest GDP in the world if it was a GDP. Yet we don't rank in the top 10 of healthiest nations. No, we're not even in the top 30. We're around 36, 37. There are third world countries that are doing better than us in terms of our health. The pharmaceutical companies are richer than ever before, yet we are sicker than ever before. And what's really interesting about the amount of money we spend on healthcare is that one out of every $4 is spent on diabetes, primarily type 2, which you and I both know is a metabolic disease that's 100% preventable and also 100% reversible, type 2 diabetes. And when you are stuck burning sugar, to your point, Brian, that's the fast path to these metabolic diseases, including diabetes, but also brain disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. And the first step is to take your metabolism and switch fuel sources to burning fat. It doesn't mean we burn fat and do keto for the rest of our life. It means if you're a sugar burner, which about 93% of Americans, according to studies, are burning sugar, the first step is to switch fuel sources. And I know that when babies are born into this world, they're naturally fat burners. Breast milk has saturated fat and cholesterol, and it helps that neurological development of the baby's brain. The baby's actually naturally in a state of ketosis. And the argument that I get is, but Ben, there's also sugar in breast milk. There's lactose, and that is true. And the baby uses that glucose so efficiently that it naturally kind of goes in and out of ketosis. So we're naturally designed to burn fat and burn sugar at the same, or back and forth, I should say. But most people then they get weaned off the breast milk, most babies. Then we're giving them high sugar instant baby formula, and then they're snacking and grazing, and now they're stuck burning sugar. They have high levels of insulin. And I make the case in chapter 2 of Metabolic Freedom that high levels of insulin, that's the first domino to trigger a cascade of metabolic diseases. And what's crazy to me, Brian, is that most conventional doctors never order a fasting insulin blood test. They will order a fasting glucose and maybe even an A1C, which are both good tests. Get
Mhm.
those done, but they don't order the fasting insulin. And the reason why I believe they don't order it is because there's not a medication to prescribe when you have high insulin. There's only a medication when you have high glucose. So why should they test it? I can't prescribe a medication. But there's a study called the Whitehall 2 study that I referenced in chapter 2 of Metabolic Freedom that shows that you could have full blown insulin resistance for on average 6 to 14 years. So in some cases, over a decade, without your fasting blood sugars and your A1C levels changing at all because your pancreas is so busy producing massive amounts of insulin until those receptor sites for insulin go deaf, then the blood sugars rise. So if we've gotten this fasting insulin test done now, we could be proactive. And if your fasting insulin levels are over 6, to me, that's too high. We want it to be sensitive between 3 and 6. And that report that comes back is going to say something between 3 and 26, 3 and 28 is the reference range. So if the it comes back a 17 or 22 or 11, it's not going to be flagged as being a problem, but that's insulin resistance. So I think one of the first things and most important things we can get done is to check your fasting insulin levels. And if it's over 6, there's some work to do. If you could get it between 3 and 6, you're going to burn fat, you're going to be insulin sensitive, and I would argue will add years to your life as well.
Yeah, that's a huge tip, and we should explain real quick to people why that is, because if your blood sugar looks normal, that means insulin's doing its job, but that doesn't mean that you're healthy. It's like it's sort of a false sense of security where your blood sugar is doing okay. You're like, "Oh, I'm good." Like, no, we have no idea how much insulin you're having to create to get that blood sugar looking normal.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we're missing it completely. And like I said, it could be your blood sugars could look completely normal for 6 to 14 years. Meanwhile, you could have full blown insulin resistance. And that's, we're just not designed to handle the amount of processed carbohydrates that we're eating. The average American consumes 200 to 300 grams of carbs per day. And I'm not saying carbs are evil, carbs are bad for you, but the majority of the carbs you're consuming are processed, hyper palatable, these Franken foods that you do a really great job exposing these food lies that we don't understand are creating massive amounts of insulin spikes inside of the body. Perfect example of how this works is when we go to the supermarket and we see a whole food like a potato and we look at the ingredients list of a potato, it's a
Mm,
carb, yes, but the ingredients list will just be one ingredient, potato. But when we go in the inner aisle and we buy potato chips, now it's a processed version of the potato. There are 20, 30 ingredients, seed oils, artificial crap in there, huge insulin spike versus when you think about the potato chips versus the actual potato. When we look at an avocado or an egg or beef, one ingredient. So, a simple first step for people, if you're just getting started, is to eat single ingredient foods. Stay away from the processed junk food because that's the difference there. It's the processed carbohydrates that are the issue, not necessarily carbohydrates.
yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because I'm not against carbs. There was a time, 10 years ago where I thought carbs are gonna kill me. And, we all go through that phase, right? Like, you're probably in that phase back in the
Yes.
day we talked about. But then you realize, no, no, it's just the processed carbs. That's what your body's not used to. So for all of history, I always take it really simple, like take it back to human history. I talk to a lot of people about this in daily life, Uber drivers, moms, older people, anyone. This is what I do, right? I bet we get annoying. We're just talking to everyone about this nonstop. But they're just like, okay, well, I mean,
Important for this part of the conversation is the amount of times that we're eating throughout the day, the snacking and the grazing. I know that I was taught when I was during my personal trainer days. I used to own a gym, a CrossFit gym here in Miami. I believe this. I believe that we need to snack and graze all day long, rev up the metabolism, boost the metabolism. But snacking and grazing is one of the fastest ways to age yourself. And it does this in many different ways. Number one, every time you snack and graze, even if it's a healthy whole food, but every time you snack and graze, you will raise glucose and insulin. And there was a study done by Dr. Don Clem that I also referenced in the book, who did it was a patient population study. It was a survey, but what he did with hundreds of his patients is he just simply had them have a food journal, and he would ask them to write down in the food journal every time they ate something, whether it was sitting down at a full meal or it was snacking, grazing. So it could have been like the handful of almonds, the kombucha, the protein bar, the protein shake, or a full on meal. And the average person was snacking and grazing, essentially eating 17 to 23 times per day.
wow.
It's glucose and insulin spike, glucose and insulin spike. So we want to eliminate that. We want to have a window where we eat our meals and our snacks, if you want to have snacks within a window, and then a window where we're allowing insulin to drop and we're in a fasted state. We have the fed state, we have the fasted state. So I would combine tip number one with single ingredient foods, focusing on that, but also eliminating the snacks and the grazing in between your meals. Start with 3 meals a day, because every time you do that, you spike glucose and insulin. And what happens is it also takes a lot of energy and bandwidth and blood flow to digest food. So now you have energy that would have been used for the brain, for to be productive in your day-to-day life, that's now being used for digestion. But when you eliminate that, you create this process called energy diversion, where you're diverting energy away from digestion to the task at hand. So it just gives you more energy, more bandwidth, essentially, to live your life and have a productive day.
Yeah, this is such a important concept. I went from I don't think I did 17 times a day. That's a lot. But I
Easy.
was the guy just kind of doing what I was told, eating the food pyramid. Yeah, just constantly hungry because I was avoiding fat, avoiding meat, stuff like that. I was avoiding red meat. I was eating the whole grains, doing the whole thing. And now I only eat 2 meals a day. I'm even trying to eat 3. I'd like to eat 3, see if I could, just not have to I just like to eat big meals, but it's changed my life, and part of it is not even being hungry. I don't have to use willpower to not snack. I eat nutrient-dense, satiating foods and red meat and eggs and sauerkraut and pickles and maybe even potatoes. Potatoes are actually a highly satiating food because it's whole.
Right.
And I don't want to snack. I refuse snacks. People are offering me things. I just say no, I'll say, let me try that later when I'm gonna eat. I think it's so important to just eat fewer times per day. And you bring up the aging part too, which is a good way to look at it too, because no one wants to age, right? We want to slow down our aging, and this is a thing that it's hard to know what's going on, right? It's hard to know that you're aging yourself or that it seems to be working in the short term.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a little short term versus long term thinking. Bodybuilders, they're all about short term thinking, like how can I get gigantic, go up on stage, or just look buff and all that. And they're eating 5 times a day, and it's working for them. You totally can do that and be ripped, right? You don't deny that. I don't deny that. But what is that going to be doing for long term health? Right? So, yeah, just talk more about that. It's like you can't see this aging happening. It's very small, but cumulative effect is huge.
Yeah, no, good point. And bodybuilders live a shorter lifespan on average than the average person because of that. There's, in the anti-aging space, there's always a discussion on mTOR, which for the audience the person listening or watching who doesn't know what mTOR is, mTOR is a pathway in your body that signals growth. So it's anabolic. It's an anabolic pathway. And you spike mTOR when you consume protein and carbohydrates. Essentially, glucose and insulin will spike your mTOR levels. The opposite of mTOR is the catabolic, more repairing, breaking down pathway, which is autophagy, which you achieve through not eating, like fasting, but also through exercise and strength training. The goal is not to be stuck in either one of these pathways. We don't want to be too much mTOR, which is the bodybuilders, the high protein, high carb, snacking, and grazing, or unfortunately the average American who doesn't work out and they still do that. And then you don't want to do too much fasting. So in the anti-aging space, a lot of anti-aging experts, they really hate mTOR. They think it's evil. We should lower mTOR as much as possible through caloric restriction, excessive fasting, and even certain medications like rapamycin, different things they're doing to just suppress mTOR. But that's also not a good idea because mTOR could be very healing in spurts. It's also important for building muscle, which we know is important for insulin sensitivity. So there's a balance here, and that's where metabolic freedom, metabolic flexibility comes into play. Today, to give you an example of what metabolic freedom looks like for the average person, I woke up this morning and I had my coffee, and I usually put about 30 grams of protein in my coffee. So I'm breaking the fast. I'm spiking mTOR, but I'm doing that because I want to. And my plan today, Brian, was to record. I had some YouTube videos to record this morning, and then I had about a 30-minute gap in between finishing that and then the time I was supposed to record with you. And then I have 2 other podcast recordings after this. So I had a 30-minute gap to eat my lunch essentially. You had texted me and said, "Can we push this up to be earlier?" And I said, "Sure." So I skipped that meal, and I'm still kind of in this fasted state, although I had the protein with the coffee. But I'm fine. Like I could go for the next hour and a half, and then I'll eat my meal after the conversation. Like that's metabolic flexibility. Like your meal is not going to determine how you feel and your schedule. I could go a day or 2 days or a week without food and be just fine. But back to the piece with the aging, there's something called the Hayflick limit, which is it's a hypothesis, but I actually believe in this hypothesis. And here's what it states: it states that our cells have a certain amount of times that it could replicate and duplicate until it goes into what's called a senescent zombie cell state. And then at that point, when it turns into a senescent cell, that leads to advanced aging. It infects other cells, and there's a lot of literature on senescent cells and zombie cells. But the faster you reach this Hayflick limit, the faster you achieve these senescent zombie cells, which we don't want. And the Hayflick limit states that the more frequent you have glucose and insulin spikes by eating processed carbs, eating frequently, the faster you reach this Hayflick limit to the point where you start duplicating cells. The cells can't duplicate anymore, and then it goes senescent, and then it starts affecting other cells. So that's why I say snacking and grazing, eating every 2 to 3 hours, it's one of the fastest ways to age yourself, partly because the glucose and insulin spikes, but also partly because of this Hayflick limit.
Yes, and it's just simple. Like you went through the science, but you can just think about it sort of logically. It's not as good if you're just constantly asking your body to deal with these things and these outside inputs that it has to put the insulin, try to level your blood sugar, doing all these things. It's better if you just, I think, just, yeah, 2 to 3 meals. Like you purposely, I'm raising my mTOR strategically for these certain times because I do want to build muscle. I don't want to be in this constant just bubble. Like some of these aging researchers want to be in a padded room, the bubble boy, it's
Yeah.
like no outside inputs. I'm going to just coast through life forever. For one, that's a terrible life. And for two, your body needs that stress, hormetic stress. It needs that challenge. It needs to grow muscle. So yeah, like guys like David Sinclair, you taking all these things. I want zero mTOR. It's kind of like these crazy vegan people. They're like, I want zero LDL, right? And we're like the whole US is going this way. These recommendations like lower LDL, lower LDL. You don't want to lower your LDL to zero. Some people think that, oh, if we just lowered our LDL to nothing, there'd be no more heart disease.
Mm,
No, vegans die of heart disease too. That's actually one of the biggest killers of vegans.
yeah.
So yeah, there's this idea of balancing mTOR and like the longevity and the autophagy states. And I made a video about this. I don't make many YouTube videos. You're the YouTube man. Everyone go to his YouTube account. You'll find a lot more good content than my YouTube account. I just throw up my podcast and that's about it. But I made this video, longevity versus growth mode. Longevity mode versus growth mode. This is how I think about it. And I think it's how you think about it. Many for many hours of the day, I want to be in longevity mode. I don't want to be constantly eating. I want to, have low mTOR and be in this state of having my body be able to heal itself and do the repair and the rest and digest and all that stuff. And then I want to work out and sprint and lift weights and eat protein and maybe have some whole food carbs. And then my mTOR will be raised, but it's on purpose. It makes sense. You need that.
I agree. I love the way outlined that. It's an easy philosophy to follow, and it works exactly. You want to get spurts of mTOR, you want to get spurts of autophagy. You don't want too much of either, and they're both opposing pathways. So that's exactly it. Get your quality protein, eat your whole food carbs, do your strength training, and then have an eating window, whether it's 6 or 8 hours or 2 to 3 meals, and then have a fasting window. That's the perfect balance, and you get to enjoy your life. When you're metabolically flexible, it's easy to live that way as well.
Yeah, and that's the point of the metabolic flexibility is that you can burn sugar or fat. Like I can burn glucose. Like I can eat some rice that's cooked in bone broth, and I make this good. Or you cook and cool it. You put it in the fridge, and then it gets more into resistant starch, stuff like that. And I can burn the carbs, and it's just fine. And then I can go back and burn fat. So some people don't understand that most people, this is what we talked about earlier, but that are just the sugar burners. Like they really don't know their body isn't really good at burning fat. And then that's why they're eating so many meals. They're kind of hangry. Their blood sugar's on a roller coaster. Go into a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. There's in chapter 2 of Metabolic Freedom, I have this burning quiz, and I, ask certain questions, and I say if you answer yes to 2 or more of these questions, there's a high probability you're a sugar burner. Now, you could test your fasting insulin and verify that right away, but without testing, this gives you an idea. So, some of the questions that I ask is, do you feel tired after eating a meal? Usually a sign of a sugar burner. Do you have more than 30 pounds of extra weight in your body? Typically a sign of a sugar burner. Do you get hangry if you skip a meal? whether it's intentional or unintentional, which is hungry and angry, irritable, your energy levels drop. That's a sign of a sugar burner. Do you have skin tags on your body? Typically, you see that around your eyelids, your neck, and on your back. That's a sign of high insulin levels and being a sugar burner. And then brown patches around the armpit area and neck are also a sign of sugar burning. So if you answered yes to at least two of those, high probability of burning sugar, and it's not a fun way to live, to Brian's point, because you're relying on your next snack or meal for a short burst of energy, that glucose hit that might last an hour or two, and then it drops, and then your blood sugar levels drop so dramatically because usually you overproduce insulin to do that. Then you're tired and fatigued, and it's this blood sugar roller coaster. And your meals and snacks dictate your entire schedule. So for the moms or the parents out there, the dads that are running errands, they're going to the post office and it's been 3 hours since their last meal, and they're in this long post office line. If you're a sugar burner, you're going to be irritable. You're going to be rude to the employees there. You're going to be so hangry and just not fun to be around because your body is so used to burning sugar. It can't burn fat. It can't produce ketones. This goes for like traveling on an airplane. This goes for just living your day-to-day life. It's not fun living your life as a sugar burner because you have to rely on snacking and grazing and meals just to give you a short burst of energy. They're typically drinking a lot of caffeine, taking a lot of stimulants like 4-hour energy drinks and Red Bulls. But when you're metabolically flexible, you could go and skip a meal. You don't have to snack. You could do a 2-day fast, a 5-day fast, because your body now has the ability to tap into stored fat for energy, which is all body fat is. It's stored energy. It's needed. We need to tap into it. And when you lower your insulin levels by lowering your carbs or by eliminating the snacking or different methods to do it, building lean muscle, you're allowing your metabolism to now switch over to stored fat for energy. And that is the goal. So that's the first step that I take people through in Metabolic Freedom. I take them from burning sugar to burning fat, and it's about a 7 to 10 day protocol on average to achieve that.
Yeah. And again, I mean, there's different tools. There's keto and there's the kind of the opposite that people call it pro-metabolic. There's different ways, even in the whole foods world, that people are doing things. Right? There's the Paul Saladino who's, eating tons of fruit and honey, and he's very active, but I think he also is still can burn fat. Right? I haven't talked to him about this, but he's eating, meals of protein and fruit, and then he's going out surfing. He's probably fat burning, right? He's not snacking every 2 hours. So you can eat a high carb. I don't know what high is. Probably lower than most Americans, actually.
Yeah,
But it's still a higher carb and still be totally metabolically flexible, right?
that's
This
right.
is this is the thing that people don't understand, because I think the holy grail of diets is being in camp, no camp. That's my new tagline. I've been saying that for a while. It's like, I don't want to be in a dietary camp, right? It's like you get stuck in your thinking. You got to zoom out, be in camp, no camp, where we could do both. Or like, what is this holy grail of being able to be more flexible with how you eat and have some fruit and some honey and still be healthy? And I realize that's possible if you're, again, eating the whole foods and working out and, having muscle. Like, that's kind of the holy grail, where we don't have to be stuck in one way of doing things forever. It's not like we have to be carnivore forever or keto forever or even the pro metabolic high carb forever. You can go back and forth, and as long as you're having the principles be correct, you can do different type of dietary strategies.
Exactly right. And there's so many different ways to do it, right? So the Paul Saladino example, I would also argue that he is probably burning fat too. If he measured his ketones, before he broke his fast overnight, he's probably in ketosis. Maybe after that surfing lesson or whatever activity he's doing, he's probably in ketosis, and then he'll have his fruit. He'll break that. So he's naturally what I call doing keto flexing. For me, my kind of schedule to that I maintain that works for me and my metabolism at this point is my Monday through Saturday. I'm primarily carnivore. I'm primarily eating just meat
Mm,
and fat, no carbs, no vegetables. I'm primarily carnivore Monday through Saturday. And on Sunday, I have a higher carb, what I call feast day, where I'll consume 300 to 400 grams of healthy whole food carbs on a Sunday. I'll lower my fat on that day, because here's an important point: we don't want to increase carbs and have high fat at the same
Mhm.
time. That's where
Yeah.
like the repeat and the pro
The
metabolic
Randall
people.
cycle,
Yeah,
that's all the
exactly, the
yeah.
Randall cycle. So we want to lower fat on a higher carb day.
Mhm.
And on that day, I'm also very active. I play a couple hours of basketball in Miami Beach at an outdoor park. So I have a feast day where I intentionally get myself out of ketosis. I'm not carnivore. It's a high carb day, kind of like that Ray Peat sort of what did you call it? Pro metabolic sort of
Mhm.
day. And then Monday, I'm back into ketosis carnivore, right? So that's one variation of it. Another variation would be you could have carbs every day for breakfast, because you're more insulin sensitive in the morning versus later. And then for lunch and dinner, there are more carnivore keto sort of meals. That's another variation to do it. But the point is, there's different ways to do this. We don't want to be locked into one different. You mentioned camp. It's funny that you say that, because
Keto
yeah, because my company is Keto Kamp. I mean, my T-shirt says it, the sign says it. But if you know anything about me, which Brian does, but I'm not dogmatic about this. People think I am, because if they just see me from the outside view and see I'm the founder of Keto Kamp, they think I'm about keto forever. I'm not. I don't think anybody should be doing keto forever. I'm a fan of what I call keto flexing. So although we're called Keto Kamp because that's just the name of the branding, I'm with you. We are not teaching people to do long-term ketosis.
That's great. Yeah, some people, even Peter Attia, he did long-term ketosis for like 4 years,
I
and then
remember.
he went against it, and now he's just anti-keto. I'm like, "Well, man, you didn't have to do it so crazy." He was counting every calorie and every carb and being obsessive over it, and then, of course, you're gonna swing back the other way, or of course, you're gonna have problems if you do it for that long. Yeah, flexibility is key, learning the principles, and yeah, just don't get stuck in one way of thinking. And yeah, I love that. Deflexing, cycling. Yeah, I've heard about there. This is not a new concept too of like carb cycling or there's just people, man, I sound like a broken record. Just learn the principles and don't get stuck in one way of thinking. And there's many ways to do it properly. Many ways. Yes.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. That's what it's all about. Now, for the 93% of Americans that are sugar burning, I do think their best bet would be to enter ketosis as the first step. I think they're in a keto deficiency. In other words, they're in a fat burning deficiency, and I think it's a valuable tool, one tool in the shed, but a valuable tool for them to enter this fat burning ketogenic state. Doesn't mean you stay there forever, but for those 93% of Americans, I think it's a very valuable tool. Now, Paul Saladino doesn't fall into that category. Dr. Mercola doesn't fall into that category. They're very metabolically healthy, and they can get away with what they're doing. And
Well, they already
we're not.
did the work, actually. Both
They've
of
already
them,
done the work.
they already
Exactly.
went keto and carnivore and all that.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Mercola has his Fat for Fuel book. He was like so keto. Of course, Saladino's the carnivore guy. So they've done the work. They've built up their metabolism. Now they don't have to intentionally like try to do keto, right? They're naturally kind of going in and out, I guess. But for 93% of Americans, I do think it's one of the first best steps and tools they can use to remind them to burn fat because they've forgotten about it.
Awesome. So what about this sugar diet? Because that's like it's all the rage or honey diet, and I mean it kind of makes sense to me. It's kind of gimmicky and it's just the newest fad, but I get it. You can lose fat. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how popular it is. Maybe just in my circles because I follow Mark Bell, and
Yeah.
he's just obsessed with it right now. And certain people on X are obsessed with it right now. So go into that.
I first heard about it a few months ago because of my YouTube comments, and I read a lot of my YouTube comments, and I kept getting these comments about, but Ben, what about the sugar diet? Have you looked into the sugar diet? I'm like, what the heck is this sugar diet? And then I did some research and I looked it up. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And um, I haven't done enough research on it to really give you a good viewpoint. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. But I would want to know one thing: are they testing their fasting insulin as they do it? What does that look like after 30 days of it, 60 days of it, 3 months of it? Like, have we seen long term data on this in regards to insulin levels? Number two, if it does make sense, if you're getting your carbs, even if you're eating all carbs, all sugar, but it's from whole foods and you're lowering your fat to like barely any fat and you're active, and yeah, you could lose weight that way. Now, is it the healthiest approach long term? I don't know. I don't know. I haven't tried it myself.
Mhm,
So I can't speak from that like
mhm.
experience of it doing it myself. So I'm still a little skeptical. I want to know about the fasting insulin. I want to know about looking at it 30 days, 6 months, etc. But what are your thoughts? What have you seen with
Oh,
that?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many diet gimmicks out there. I mean, there was the Twinkie diet, the professor that did this years ago, probably 12 years ago, and he lost weight on the Twinkie diet. But he said he felt terrible. It was a nightmare. He was sick. He had no energy. Of course, if you just restrict enough. So that's one thing. Another thing is, yes, they go super low fat. You have to go like zero fat, all carbs. And it's some people even call it sugar fasting, which also makes sense. I mean, throughout history, if you couldn't get an animal, I was with the Hadza. We went hunting. Luckily, they're very good at getting animals. They are amazing. They don't even have much land anymore. All the good land is
Wow.
taken by cities and game reserves, these safaris, all these things. All the animals are gone. Yet
Wow.
these guys can still go and get animals to eat every single day. So that tells me a lot about human history. People would think, oh man, our ancestors, we were just starving all the time. And I say, no, absolutely not. These guys could shoot a bird out of a tree that I didn't even see. They shoot any animal. I didn't even see most of the animals they shot. I'm like, how did you s- shoot it? I don't even see it. And yet you hit it. So
Wow.
they're incredible. But if they didn't get an animal, guess what we did? Well, along the way, they saw a tree and they had a little axe and they cut it open and they made a little fire and they smoked out the bees and they ate a bunch of honey. Right? So
Mm,
if you go and you're hunting all day and for some reason there was no animals and you got some honey, that's a sugar fast. That's a honey diet, whatever you call it. It's basically a way that your body can work that will keep you alive. You're not getting fat. These guys, it's not like, oh man, they gained all this weight because they ate honey a few times. No, it's just you're not eating any fat, so you can eat a bunch of carbs. It's a bunch of energy. And it's just, yeah, metabolic adaptation. So yeah, I don't think it's a good diet. It's not nutrient dense at all, right? There we know we need protein, nutrients, vitamins, minerals, all these things. So you're not getting that. So of course, I mean, you can go vegan for a couple years and you're not going to have problems maybe. And well, some people get problems quicker than that. But right, you could do things for a long time before all of the problems happen. And so the nutrient is a concern. The just yeah, if you go low fat enough, but this is also Wayne Kempner. I don't know if his name is Wayne. Dr. Kempner had a diet called the starch diet. And I think it was decades ago, maybe even more. And he put people on an all starch diet and they lost fat. Again, if you're not eating any fat, you you could lose weight. I get it. It's just it's about a balance of nutrients and energy. And if you're not having a lot of fat, but you're having a lot of carbs, but you're still eating less, you're gonna be okay. The potato diet. People
that's
lose
right.
weight on the potato diet, right?
Yeah.
It's all carbs. People are like, oh, I don't get it. Well, you're eating no fat. Potatoes don't have any fat. I mean, of course, they have trace amounts of fat. All foods have a little bit, like very, very small amounts of fat. But it all makes sense. It's just sort of this new fad, new hack that can help people lose weight in the short term, but
Mhm.
that doesn't mean much.
I think well said, by the way. Yeah, well, great breakdown, and I agree with what you just shared. And I also think we are always kind of looking for the next thing, right? It was, keto was super popular, like 2018, 2019 was like the peak of the keto diet, and then started to die down. And then, the vegan diets has had its like kind of spurts here and there. It's dying down, which is good. The carnivore has risen. Carnivore is super popular now. Now we see this sugar diet sort of fasting, sugar fasting sort of thing rising up. But the point is this: sometimes it's not the diet or protocol you're changing to that's the reason why you're getting results, but the change in itself, right? Because when you create a change, a dietary change, whether it's from like standard American to keto or to paleo or to carnivore to the sugar diet, you create an adaptation. You mentioned the word metabolic adaptation. I think
Mm,
that's the biggest key here, and that adaptation has many benefits because the gut microbiome has to adapt, your mitochondria have to adapt. Essentially, good cells start to get stronger, bad cells don't adapt. And it's the change, right? The diet, Dr. Pompa calls it diet variation. He's on point with that. It's the variation. I think we get into trouble when we stick with the same foods, whether you want to call it a diet or set of foods long term. And this sugar diet sounds like it might be a quick fix to shed some extra fat. At least we're seeing that.
mhm.
But like you mentioned, you're not getting enough amino acids, enough protein, essential fatty acids. And what is it going to look like 6 months in, 12 months in, a couple years in? Maybe it's a good reset for a couple weeks or a month. I don't know, but it's not going to be something sustainable. But that goes for everything we're talking about here. It's about the variation. We don't want to do keto forever.
Mhm.
Another form of metabolic, so one form of metabolic inflexibility is burning sugar and only
Mhm.
sugar. That's the 93% of Americans. The other form of it is the people in my keto space, which are only burning fat. They forgot how to burn sugar. So the goal is to have variation and change it up. It's the adaptation that creates that magic, I believe.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. And also, it's the intentionality and any kind of thing you focus on. And if you have any new diet, you're probably going to lose some weight. And I think they've studied this because any sort of intentional change will change your habits. You're going to start maybe watching, what you eat. You're not going to be eating the dessert. You're probably going to be like moving a little more because you're on this intentional shift. So, of course, anything can work in the short term. And I agree with that. That's why they're like, oh, 98% of diets fail, 96% of diets fail. I'm like, yeah, because they're all of these short term things, but they work in the beginning because you're being intentional about it. And so the people are fighting back against diet culture, right? There's these body positivity people fighting back against diet culture because they say it doesn't work and they say that they're only short term. And I agree with them because everyone's doing it wrong. They
Yeah.
are getting some quick results from any diet because they're making more intentional decisions, and then they don't work because they're still eating processed foods and next week they're still at Chili's. Or
Yeah.
your bounces back because they're eating plant-based and they're not getting enough protein and nutrients.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's shift into this mindset thing. It's a huge thing, and I think you get into it a bit and talk about that. There's this whole like mental side to things, just anything to do with that side, because I think one of the most important things to do is in the whole diet culture or diet world is to identify as someone who is healthy, right? Like that is a biggest first step. And I know people who have all the information, they know what to do. They've listened to my podcast, they all about it. They're here in Austin. They just won't identify as someone who is healthy, right?
Mm.
They will not embody that. They will do it for a week and then all of a sudden, like I said, they're at Chili's. Or I don't know, do people still go to Chili's? I don't even know. But is that still a restaurant? Have they closed? They
It
should
is. No,
close.
they're still around. I've seen them
Okay,
in
good.
Miami.
It's just an example of just like a garbage restaurant that's just everything's just pure fried in oil. But
Uh-huh.
y- if you what the I changed, I mean, I had the right information 10 years ago, 11 years ago. I read Mark Sisson's book, Primal Blueprint. So I had the right information, but I also changed my identity, right? I am now someone who eats healthy. I am now, all my decisions changed from there. I am now someone who does not eat sugar, flour, and oil, these three highly refined ingredients, right? So take it away. Take it away from there.
I love it. No, I love that you brought this up in the conversation because you're spot on, Brian. It's probably the most important thing. And chapter 10 of Metabolic Freedom is all about this. This is my favorite chapter in the book. It's all about how your thoughts influence fat loss, health, or disease and weight gain. And there's a section of the chapter on the self image. And to your point, it's impossible. And I'm saying this, it's kind of an absolute statement, but it's true. It's impossible to outperform your self image, the way you view yourself. And the way you view yourself is beyond your conscious level of viewing yourself. And I'll unpack that right now. There's a book that came out in the 1960s called Psychocybernetics from a plastic surgeon named Dr. Maxwell Maltz. He was a world renowned plastic surgeon and he would work with patients that had these really wicked facial disformities. These patients were unhappy, they were depressed, and they were very self conscious. So, because their self image identified with that facial disfigurement. So, they would hire him to perform plastic surgery, and he was the best in the world. He would remove the facial disfigurements from these patients. But he noticed, the doctor, that even after the surgery, the patients continued to be depressed, self conscious, and have low self esteem. And in some cases, they would literally look in the mirror and still see the facial disformities
Mm,
because that is what their self image identified with. And it wasn't until he changed their self image at a subconscious level that they begin to be happy, have more confidence, and live a better life. So the example that I give in chapter 10 is somebody who's overweight. If you've been overweight for a very long time, like I used to be obese for 20 years. So my self-image, and I imagine those that are overweight right now watching and listening, your self-image is that of an overweight person. And you can make a conscious decision to make the changes because you're listening to Brian's podcast, you're starting a program, you've hired a coach, whatever it is. You make a conscious decision, I need to lose 50 pounds. So you start eating clean food, you start fasting, you start exercising, you start doing all the things you consciously know what to do. But you haven't worked on your subconscious mind or your self-image. And what's going to happen is 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, maybe a month in, you've made some progress and some momentum, but then you will find a way to course correct and sabotage yourself to match the self-image. So you might lose 10 pounds the first month, and the next month you find all 10 pounds, and sometimes you find 12 or 14 of those pounds to match the self-image. So we need to change the way we view ourselves at a subconscious level. You said it perfectly. You identify as somebody who eats healthy, who stays away from inflammatory foods. And you can make that conscious decision to identify with that, but it isn't until you replace the self-image in the subconscious mind that it starts to actually work for you and you start to be unstoppable. So how do you do that? There's only two ways to change your self-image. It's in your paradigm. Only two ways to change it. The first way is what's called a personal emotional impact. I'll give you an example of what that means. Near-death experience is an example of that. A cancer diagnosis is an example of that. The loss of a loved one is an example of that. 9 times out of 10, it's a negative experience and it's also unpredictable. So ideally, we don't want to use that as the way to change the self-image because that's usually a difficult time to go through. The second way and the best way to change that self-image is what's called the constant spaced repetition of that new self-image. This is the way that it was built. This is the way that it should be changed. So the way that you change it is to literally write down, and I do this with everything in my life. You literally write down on an index card or a sticky note or a piece of paper that new self-image of yourself. And you write it down in the present tense, starting with, I'm so happy and grateful now that, and then you write that self-image. So the example that I give in chapter 10, if you have a self-image of an overweight person, you would write down, I'm so happy and grateful now that I'm at my perfect weight. My health is perfect. I have amazing energy levels. The perfect health I seek is now seeking me. I remove any blockages between us. And you simply write that down and you read it in the morning. You read it at night. You read it throughout the day and you do it for 30 days. And it replaces the old self-image in the subconscious mind with a new idea. And that's where you start to become unstoppable. That's where you stop sabotaging yourself. And I know the second I said to do this, the left brainers that are listening and watching that are more analytical think this is like woo-woo, BS, doesn't work. There's science to back it up, which I reference in chapter 10. But I would also say, if your way is not working, why don't you try mine? Like, give me 30 days of writing down that new self-image, which is actually a part of the 30-day protocol in the book, and watch what it does to change the way you view yourself at a subconscious level. This is exactly what I've done in my life to change my self-image, and it works really well. So I think it's a really important part of this conversation, especially for those people that know what to do consciously, but keep sabotaging themselves because of their self-image.
This is so good because it's hard to give actionable advice to this sometimes, right? Because it's so hard for people to make this change of identity, but that is an actual actionable thing that people can do. And yet, so many people, like me, I mean, I relied. All right, what happened is I lost both my parents, so I kind of relied on that tragedy that
Emotional impact.
that made me change. And sadly, a lot of people won't do anything until that tragedy happens. Maybe, yeah, they get their big heart disease scare, or, some lab test, or actually a full-blown heart attack before they'll change. So yes, it's very hard to completely change your life without a major event, but this is one way that you can kind of hack that and do it in advance of that.
Exactly. And same thing with me. Well, I shouldn't say same thing, but very similarities with my dad. So my dad passed away from the complications of diabetes back in 2014. That was my emotional impact. That's what changed my paradigm, my self-image, and took what I was doing from a hobby to like a duty and a calling, right? So ideally, we don't want to have to go through the suffering that is required to change that paradigm. So the best way is to write it down, write the new self-image. And I'll share something else. You could also apply this to pretty much any area in your life, like for goals. I learned this from Bob Proctor many years ago, and I apply this to everything that I do in my life. And I'll write down on a goal card, and that's what I have here. For those who are watching on YouTube, I have these 4 different goals here. I write it down in the present tense, but it sounds so like woo woo to some people, like the law of attraction, but it's a scientific law that what you feed energy into it starts to expand. And I'll give an example of how this has manifested in my life to hopefully inspire people to do this. If you're skeptical, I understand, because I was skeptical the first time I heard it. When I started writing Metabolic Freedom and I was ready to start promoting the book, one of the goals that I wrote down on a goal card was, I'm so happy and grateful now that my published book, Metabolic Freedom with Hay House, is a New York Times bestseller. That's what I wrote down 7 months ago, Brian. And I would read it every morning. I would read it before bed. I would take it in my pocket. If I was driving and I was at a stoplight, I would pull it out and read it. I would just do it over and over and over. Now, being a New York Times bestselling author is very difficult to do. There's 33 million books, and only 10 books out of 33 million books make the list in this category every week. 10 books. I've never done it before. This is my first book with a publisher. Being a first-time published author, you never hit the list. It's super rare. So it was like a pipe dream for me to achieve this goal. But I kept reading it. I kept doing it because I believed that this works. This is what Bob Proctor has taught me. And I lived from that experience that I am a New York Times bestselling author before I even saw the results, before the book came out. And I'll give you a couple examples of how I did that. I was speaking at Meatstock 2025, which is a conference, a great conference for carnivore that took place actually a week before my book published. And there was a documentary crew there that was doing a carnivore documentary, and they wanted to interview me. So they had their whole setup, all about this. And they asked me to introduce myself. And I introduced myself. My name is Ben Azadi, and I'm the New York Times bestselling author of Metabolic Freedom.
Mhm.
Now, this is 5 days before the list comes out. I had no idea, but I believe I had the faith that I was going to do it. The list came out. It comes out 1 week after your book is published. The list came out, and we made the New York Times list. Like,
Wow.
incredible. And I share that not to impress people, but to impress upon them. Like, it might sound crazy, it might sound woo-woo, but if you write it down and you read it and repeat it, it will change your life, whether it's a goal, whether it's a new self-image, whatever it is. It has worked for me. Now I have 4 different ones that I want to accomplish, and I have no doubt that just a matter of time before I hit it.
I love that. I love that. And I have been kind of doing this for many years without ever reading about it or like studying it. Just years ago, I just had this idea that some things, it was a foregone conclusion that this would happen. Right. Or I remember 8 years ago, I was like, I wrote down sapien, and I would have a product line, and I would have, like a whole platform, a podcast, all these things. And then they happened. Right now I have the Sapien Center. I have my Nose to Tail company. I have the Peak Human podcast. We signed with the production company last week for Food Lies, right?
That's awesome.
So many things are happening. And it's because I truly believed it was this foregone conclusion that I have created all these things, that I would be successful. And this was 8 years ago. I'm telling you, I had 0 followers. I was the biggest nobody in the world. I was a mechanical engineer, and I was working in tech, and I had no followers. I had no credentials. And so I do believe in this, even though I am an engineer and I have that analytical mind. But it's because I operated my life to make that happen, right? You did different things because you thought you were going to be the New York Times bestseller. It's not like you just sat there and thought about it and did nothing. You went out there, you got on people's podcasts, you worked with your publisher, you had all these strategies. There's so many things you did differently because you had that. And so, yeah, it of course it makes sense. It's but you have to do the work.
Yes. Yeah. It's a fair point. That's super cool about your backstory there. And yeah, you're definitely more of a left brainer, having that engineering background. And the left brainers have more of a difficult time understanding what I just shared here. But once the left brainers get it, they like really get it. And yes, we've heard of the law of attraction, but what people don't understand is that the law of attraction, it's actually a secondary law. The first law is the law of vibration. And the law of vibration are your thoughts, your feelings, and the most important thing, your actions, right? So the law of attraction is determined by essentially the law of your action. So you don't just think and grow rich, right? That's the book.
It's a book, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book, but you act upon it. You use your imagination to bring the future into your reality, and you live as if you're that person. You act and you take the necessary steps. I worked my ass off for this book
Mhm.
to hit the list. I did 65 podcasts in 60 days. I traveled the world. I hired a whole team to help with this. Like, I worked my ass off. It wasn't just me writing it down and doing nothing else, to your point. So the law of attraction works, but it's a secondary law after the law of action. That is the first thing that most people miss.
I love it, and you took action. Go back a little more into your personal journey because we kinda skimmed over that, but you were obese. Yeah, you were not doing well, and you've been super healthy for how many years now?
17 years is when I had my transformation. So in 2008, 2007, 2008, I was 23 years old, 250 pounds, so 34% body fat, actually categorized as obese. And I was depressed, high blood pressure, high blood sugar. I was suicidal. I was looking for ways to end my life, and I didn't go through with it because I kept thinking about my mom. I didn't want to hurt my mom. And it forced me to figure things out. It started with more reading self-development books, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Tony Robbins, Bob Proctor, and it really helped me take responsibility, which was the first step. Then I started to just eat real food, right? That's the message. 17 years ago, it's the message today. Move my body, and I went through this incredible transformation where I lost 80 pounds in 9 months. I didn't do keto, I didn't do carnivore, I didn't even do much fasting. I was just eating real food and moving my body. 80 pounds in 9 months. I went from 34% body fat at my highest to 6% body fat at my lowest at that time. And that's what got me into the health space. The depressive thoughts, the suicidal thoughts started to go away, and it went away completely. Then it got me into the health space as a personal trainer for many years. I mentioned I had a gym for many years. And then I got more into like the metabolic health space, keto fasting in 2013, 2014.
That's great, man. Well, congratulations. I mean, yeah, I love when people actually do it themselves and it's
Yeah,
not all just theoretical. I mean, mine was just not as impressive. Yeah, I probably lost only like 20, 25 pounds of fat. But yeah, all my problems went away, just ate real
awesome.
food. Yeah, very, very doable. So before we wrap up, I want to come back around to one thing I wrote down. You mentioned the third world countries that are doing better than us in health rankings. And that makes sense to me because now that I've been to some of these third world countries and I talked about Africa and the Hadza and the Maasai, I was in Uganda. These people, I believe they're healthy enough. They don't need all these medical interventions. They're eating real food. They're moving their body. It makes sense. You don't need all of this stuff if all they have is real food a lot of the time. Well, people who are not doing well are when the oils and the sacks of corn flour come in, right? So that's a problem in Africa, especially in the cities is and in the villages. They're getting imported sacks of flour. They're like trying to get fed and get
Food, but at what cost? And it's unfortunate we don't have all these diseases because of lack of medication. It's not because the body was built with so many flaws. I believe God built the body to be self-healing, to be incredibly the world's greatest physician is within the cells. We just have to find out what's interfering with it, right? Remove the interference and the body will heal itself. And that's exactly what I aim to do with Metabolic Freedom. The first half of the book is all about those top interferences and then the solutions, and then there's a 30-day plan. And I just want the audience to know, like, you're dealing with symptoms right now. The symptoms are not your problem. They're a result of the problem. The symptoms are actually a gift. It's your body's way of communicating to you. It's your body's check engine light. So don't view the symptoms of something you hate. View the symptoms as something you're grateful for. Thank you, body, for showing me something I'm eating, something in my environment is throwing this metabolism out of homeostasis. I'm going to figure out what that is. And once you do figure out what that is, the innate intelligence within your body will go to heal. Whether you're 21, 31, 71, or 91, the body will heal itself. And that's my premise. I know it's just, you have a similar premise. Just remove the interference, and the body will heal itself.
It's that simple, right? Yeah, and it's aligned to nature, right? And aligning to nature means your body expects certain inputs. It expects certain foods, it expects some movement, it expects clean water, and it doesn't expect microplastics. So yes, it's the same kind of concept put in a different format of, yeah, the interference is remove the it's just modernity. All of these modern things that we have is that interference, and not that we have to go live in a cave. It's just, how do you live in this modern world by removing all of those things that your body just doesn't know how to deal with. Super simple, hard to sell. It's not, yeah, there's no medication to sell or fancy thing. It's, you just have to do the work. So
That's right.
thanks so much for this book and for all the stuff you do. And yeah, I'll see you hopefully soon at some conference.
I'm sure we'll make it happen. I love Austin, and if you come to Miami, we'll hang out here. I'll just share real quick. If your audience wants to get the book, it's available everywhere, bookstores, online. But if you want to we have a free course we're giving away on the metabolism, 12 lessons on the metabolism, with some exclusive interviews in the course with Dr. Jason Fung,
Mhm.
Megan Ramos, Cynthia Thurlow, and Dr. Daniel Pompa. And you could get the entire course and interviews for free when you buy the book over at metabolicfreedombook.com. The book is available on hardcover. It's also available on Kindle, and then Spotify and Audible. I narrated the audios myself. So if you want the
Mm.
course and the interviews, it's metabolicfreedombook.com.
Amazing. And where do people follow you on Instagram and all that?
Instagram is at the Ben Azadi, and then my website is benazadi.com.
Good stuff, man. Well, let's get this out there, and yeah, I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you and your work, brother.
Thanks.